Hello. So after outlining the initial steps for the problem, let's go ahead and start formulating our problem. So step number one, problem formulation. Our goal is to understand exactly what we need to do and thus drive what we call the scope of the solution. Here is the problem is to convert between units. So how do we convert between units? One thing you wanted to know, if you cannot understand and solve the problem yourself, you cannot write an application that solves that problem. So let's see how can we convert between units. If I ask you convert between these two units, what would be your first response? That's correct. The first response, what units? Do you want to convert between length units? You want to convert between weight units? Do you want to convert between temperatures? What exactly are you converting with? So the first thing is that we need to define what category of units do we want to convert between. So let's say we're going to go with length. So if we want to convert between two units for length, and I say let's go ahead and do that, you will say, all right, what is the unit you want to convert from? Let's say I'm going to convert from feet. And then you will say, okay, what do you want to convert the feet to? Unit to convert to. Let's say I'm going to convert to an inch. And then you will say how many you want to convert. What's the amount? The amount to convert. So we need three things. We need the amount to convert, what are we converting from, and what are we converting to. Let's say I'm going to give you 10. So I told you I have 10 feet, and I want to know how much these are in inches. How would you solve this problem? You may immediately jump and say, well, that's 120. That's great, but I want you to pause a little bit. And remember that our goal is to try to break this down into the rudimentary steps. Our brain is very powerful, and we want to understand the steps that we go through in order to make those instructions and provide them to the computer. So what you did here to convert it from the feet to an inch, you first ask in your mind, what is the conversion factor? And you remember that 1 feet is equal to 12 inches. That 12 is called the conversion factor. That's what it takes to convert from feet to an inch. So if you have 1 feet, it will take 12 inches. So if you have 10 feet, then you will take the amount, you multiply that by the conversion factor. So you will say that the amount, the result, equal the amount multiplied by the conversion factor. And what we have here is what we call the formula. So this is the equation, the formula, or the model. Once you figure out the model that represents your problem, you are halfway there in defining the scope of the app and defining what the app will do. This is a very simple problem, converting between units, and I intentionally using it so that we can see working through the app. But you can take more complex problems that will result in more complex formulas or more complex equations or more complex models that maybe not one step like that, maybe it will be multiple steps. It doesn't matter. It's just going to mean multiple instructions. But the concepts and the process and the steps are the same. So from this, what we learned is that if you have an amount and you have two units, the unit you want to convert from, the unit you want to convert to, and you know the conversion factor, you can get the result. So you will need actually four things. You will need the amount, you will need the unit from, you will need the unit to convert to, and you will need the conversion factor. If you have these four, then you are able to convert between units, which is what the app, what the original problem is providing for you. So if you want to then go ahead and define the scope is the big outcome of the if the first step in the app development process is defining the scope of the app. So here the app will ask the user to provide an amount to convert, a unit to convert from, and a unit to convert to. The user, the app will then respond, will perform the conversion, and display result to the user. How do you want the results to be displayed? Sometimes it is important to know from the beginning, because sometimes the client or your understanding of the problem dictates how the result should be displayed. Maybe what I will do is I will say the result will be displayed as amount followed by the unit from equal result followed by unit to. As an example, what I did before, 10 feet equal 120 inch. Alright, so that defines the scope of our app. There is still one more piece on the app, on the scope, what categories of units the app will support. You've seen in the research we done in the first video of this module, most of the apps allows the user to select multiple categories or support multiple categories, and the user makes a category, and then under that category there are different units that the app support. Because we are in a learning process here, so we're gonna simplify and say just one unit, one category. So we're gonna build an app for one category. And I'm going to choose length category. So we will build our app for the length of categories, and inside length we're gonna define the units that the app will support. So we'll say the app will support conversion among feet, inch, centimeter, meter, kilometer, maybe forget about that, mile, or you can add centimeter there or not. It's up to you. You can add any other units as well. You can choose to do weight, whatever it is, but for simplicity, let's start first with doing one category. Then if you feel like going and doing more, you can go ahead and try to build for multiple categories. So that defines the scope of our app. The second step is to do the solution formulation. So in solution formulation, we follow the model view controller design pattern, and we try to first define what kind of data we have and how we're going to model it. So here we have an amount, that's data. And what kind of data is this? This is a decimal number. We learned before that in a decimal number we can use the type float. So we can still use the type float for a decimal number. We also have the unit from. And what type of data is this? This is text. So we learned before about the type string. So we can use the type string for that. Then we have the unit 2, which is also text, and we'll use the type string as well. Then we have the unit, we have the result, which is also text, and we'll say this is going to be string. And we have the conversion factor, which is also a decimal number. I'm sorry about result is not a text. I'm not focused. Result here is a decimal number. So we will use float for both the result as well as the conversion factor. Conversion factors, we can use it as variables, or we can provide it as constants inside our code, and we'll look at that and see how we're going to do. Then about the units, we have 5 or 6 different units. How are we going to provide for those? So we can say that we'll use a file. We'll use for the units, the list of units. So the list of available units, there's another type we need to provide the list of available units, because the unit from is what the user select that they want to convert from, but they're going to select from a list of units. So in a list of units, that's a collection of strings, and we learned before that we can use the NS array type to model the list of units. There's also another type called NS dictionary. And at the end of these videos, we can solve this problem and build this app using an NS array as the model for the list of units, or an NS dictionary. In this original round, I'm going to use NS array since we used it before, but I'll be providing towards the end, I'll show you how you can use NS dictionary to model the list of units as well. So that's the list of units. So where would we save the list of units? This is, to remind you, very similar to the list of quotes that we used in project number 1. These are constants, meaning that I know about them at the time of developing the app. This is not something the user will provide. Even if you let the user provide, the app need to give a base amount of units for the user to choose from. There's no need for the user to know that, and there's no need for the user, for instance, to enter the conversion factor, because once you know the units, these things are standards or constants, so the app should know it by itself. So we can say, like, we will put the list of units in a file. So we'll use file to store the list of units. So that is the model. And as I mentioned before, when you do the process, remember we're doing iterative cycle, so you write as much as you can, and if you're stuck, you move on, and you let the iterative process help you develop what needs to be developed. So how would the app look like? In the view, you can address the view design by providing a wireframe or a sketch. So you can make that on a piece of paper. How would you want the app to look like? Maybe we can say we'll put here a text field for the user to enter amount. How would the user give us the units? The unit is a list, and it is a known list. We can give the user a text field to enter the unit, or we can use the wheel, or what we call a picker view. We'll use 2 of them like that. So this will be a picker view to choose the unit from, and this will be a picker view to choose the unit to. Then maybe we display the result in a label here. So, and for the app to, once the user enter the amount, they selected both of them, the app needs an action or an event to trigger the calculation of the result. So we'll start by adding like maybe a button here that says go ahead and convert. So we'll say that we're going to use, or in this design we're going to use a button which is modeled as a UI button. We'll use a text field which is a UI text field, and we'll use picker views and we'll use a label. The difference between a text field and a label: in a label the user cannot edit, in a text field the user can edit and enter values. So that will be our view for now. Then we move to the controller. What does the controller need to do? The controller need to add the event of the click of a button, so that will be a custom event. The controller will do two things: will load the units from file, and will do that at the event view.load. When the view loads, anything to bring to the attention of the app, you want to do it at the view.load. Then it needs to retrieve the user selections. The user will make 3 selections. What they will enter the amount, they will choose the unit from, they will choose the unit to, and then they will hit go. When they hit go, the controller will then retrieve the selections, convert the units, and display the result. And when would the controller do all of this? It will do at the user event. And we'll start with the user event in the button. And in the extra credit for this project, we will see how we can make the conversion at the user selection of either picker view or when the user hit enter on the text field. So we'll start with a simple event that the user hit a button, and then we'll, in the extra credit, we'll see how we can incorporate all the other user action. In general, you want to make every component and every possible action, you make the app responsive to that action and not to ignore it. So that's a high-level view of the controller, and that moves us to the third step, which is solution implementation. In the solution implementation, we break down the idea into smaller solutions, and we call them iterations. So we start with iteration number 1, which is the one we're doing right now, by the way, and this is for planning. Then we go to iteration number 2, and then you can decide how you're going to break down this app. I'm going to start by iteration 2, create the file, or maybe display units in one picker view. Then once we display the units in one picker view, we can say iteration 3 will be to display in second picker view, and then iteration 4 we can say we want to convert from one unit, maybe we'll say from feet to inch. Just implement a conversion from just feet to an inch. And then in iteration 5, we finish all conversions. And then in iteration 6, we'll implement user selection and enter events. And that will be an extra credit, that last iteration. And when we're done with this solution, I'm going to provide one more to show you how we can use dictionary instead of an array to solve this problem. So we complete with this video iteration number 1 plan. We know what we're going to do. In the next video, we'll start with iteration number 2.